Due to copyright, I can't publish many audiobooks on YouTube. At our audiobook novel service, we offer access to over 300 full novels from Pocket FM, Webnovel, Audible, Wuxia, and more, all in high-quality audio format. Each novel is available with a one-time payment only. No subscriptions, no monthly payment, and no ads. Payments via PayPal or Ko-fi. To browse the full list of available novels, message me directly on Telegram or WhatsApp, or check out our full catalog on Discord. Chapter 576, The Congress of Nezharat 1. The Congress of Nezharat. That was the name of the event to which Leon and I were invited. Bringing together nearly all the major powers from each empire, along with the 7 churches, it was a gathering of immense scale. A congress of such magnitude was rarely convened, having occurred only 4 times in the past, each instance sparked by a crisis that involved the mirror dimension. I don't want to go. You must go. No, I don't want to. I'm doing just fine in the academy. Should I tell the family head that you're not going? Wait, hold on. Now that I think about it, as the heir of the Ivinus household, it's my duty to attend. Pussy. What did you say? Leon turned his head away, absent-mindedly scratching his ear with his pinky. I could only glare at him from my spot. It wasn't like I was actually scared of the family head. No, it was more like he was too much trouble to refuse. I could only imagine what he'd do if I turned him down, either concoct some elaborate scheme to drag me along or simply pester me in the most troublesome way possible. In other words, I had no choice but to go. Here goes my free time. I had an inkling that something was going to happen at the Congress. Just an inkling. What are you doing? Snapping me out of my thoughts, I suddenly saw Leon walk over with a massive bag. It was filled to the brim with items, and upon closer inspection, I saw 2 swords? No, wait, 3? Why would he? That's not all that I'm bringing. As if proud of his collection, Leon set the bag down and opened it, retrieving several items and showing them to me. The first item he took out was a small necklace with a purple gemstone in the middle. This relic can shield against powerful mental attacks. It might not withstand a full-force strike from you, but it should be enough to block basic mental and emotive attacks. Oh, and it also enhances my ability to see through illusions. Oh, that's it or no, wait. Why do you need that in the first place? Look here. Leon retrieved another item. It was a plain black shorts. You brought a change of clothes? No, stupid. Leon shook his head before suddenly channeling his mana into the shirt. In an instant, a small shield materialized around him and he shot me a smug smile. See this? He looked so proud. I spent a good amount of money on this. Not only does it generate a shield around the wearer when mana is injected, but the more mana you pour in, the stronger the shield becomes. It has an amplifying effect. If you inject your tier 6 mana, you can create a shield nearly on par with that of a tier 7 mage. Oh! Okay, now I was impressed. With me needing to save as much money as possible in order to acquire the rights to the mirror crack near Elner, I barely spent any of my money on relics. Although I understood that they would help me grow stronger, I knew that, in the long run, acquiring the mirror crack would be far more beneficial for my growth. After all, once I acquire the mirror crack, I plan on going there often to fight monsters and level up. As of right now, entering the mirror dimension was quite a difficult task. Unless I joined a guild or was part of the royal family, the only way that I could enter a mirror crack was through several extremely troublesome processes. There was also the academy mirror crack, but that was currently out of order. The only way to enter the mirror dimension without any worries was by acquiring one. But still, I'm jealous. I really wanted the relics Leon had. But most importantly, check this one out. It can hide my presank. Are you sure it's a good idea to be using your money like that? Leon paused and looked at me. I then pointed at the multiple swords sticking out from his bag. I get being prepared, but why are you bringing 3 swords? Shouldn't one be more than enough? Why? Are you kidding me? Leon cut me off, looking at me with what appeared to be disgust. Do you even know why I went ahead and bought so many relics? Heir. It's because of you. Me? I raised my brow in surprise. Why was he suddenly acting like this? Wait, could it be? We're about to be leaving soon. Do you know what it means going out with you? I had no words or excuse. Indeed. But it's not like it's my fault. You know. I get it. You're going to say something about me not doing my job, right? Yes. I subconsciously nodded. That was when Leon looked down at the bag before him. And that's why I had no choice but to buy this. 1, because you're a walking disaster. 2, because I need them for my job. And 3, for my own safety. I've come too close to death, too many times to not leave prepared. Placing all the items back into the bag, Leon slowly lifted it and placed it on his shoulders before turning around. Oh, and for your information, I don't get paid enough for this. Clank. He smashed the door on his way out of my room, leaving me at a complete loss. The fuck just happened? Asterisk. While the 4 empires were mostly at peace, each preoccupied with its own problems, that didn't mean minor conflicts between them didn't exist. Conflicts over land had always existed among the 4 empires, often resulting in skirmishes. In total, 15 unoccupied territories existed between the 4 empires, with none of the empires able to agree on ownership. One such territory was called Nezharat. Situated near the borders of the Naz and Sifa Empire, Verdant Empire, and Aurora Empire, Nezharat was a relatively large territory largely covered by towering mountains. It was in such a place that the Congress was being held. Chuuk-chuk. We have arrived at the final destination, Nezharat. Please depart using the exit doors. Ugh. The train eventually came to a stop and I stretched my body. At the moment, every part of me ached. The ride from Lens to Nezharat took over 9 hours, with the train coming to an occasional stop in several places. Let's go, we don't have much time. They'll close the doors soon. But it's the final destination. That's not how it works here. Under Leon's constant nagging, I took my luggage and headed for the train's exit. If teleportation weren't so expensive, I probably would have used it. Unfortunately, I had to spare every little penny and the family head was similarly stingy. The moment I asked him for extra money, he directly hung up on me. Oh, it's cold. Stepping out of the train, I immediately felt my skin prickle at the cold as I hastily covered my body with a layer of mana. On the other hand, as if he had anticipated this from the start, Leon stood beside me, a large jacket draped over his body. He gave me a casual look before taking a step to the side and hastily looking around. What are you doing? I'm checking for any possible threats. You never know when someone might show up and attack us. It could be a tree, a dragon, your mom, or even a rock. At this point, anything could be an enemy. The thing that hurt the most about his words was the fact that I couldn't rebuke him at all. We should get out of here. We're attracting too much attention. The first thing I noticed upon stepping out of the station, aside from the cold, was the sheer number of people. The place was packed and nearly everyone was dressed in formal attire, many of them looking like important figures. Although I wasn't sure if they still remembered me from the summit a year ago, I decided to be cautious and masked my features along with Leon. Coming out of the station, I was greeted by the sight of a large city. Vendors lined both sides of the cobblestone street, while large houses and buildings stood along the side. Not far from the vendors was a large portal where several people walked out every few minutes. The teleport station? I looked at the station with envy. If only I didn't have to save my money. One striking feature of the street was its gentle incline, leading toward a towering mountain in the distance, its peak piercing through the clouds. But that wasn't the most eye-catching thing. The most striking feature was the massive, dome-shaped white building embedded into the mountainside, its structure supported by several towering pillars that gave it an almost otherworldly presence in the distance. That's where the Congress will be held. We still have a day, so we should find the nearest inn and drop off our stuff. Rather than me dropping anything, it would be you who needs to drop his stuff. The goal of concealing our faces was to avoid drawing attention, but Leon's enormous bag was as conspicuous as ever. As a result, we attracted a lot of attention. Why is he carrying such a large bag? Is he his attendant? Where are they from? They must be some low-tier nobles. I could even hear the murmurs of the people around us as they snaked glances our way. But the attention didn't last very long. Hey, look! Oh my god, check it out! A sudden commotion drew the attention of everyone present, and when I turned my head to face the distance, my eyes paused on the large portal that stood in the distance. It was then that I saw it fluctuate as several figures walked out. In an instant, it was as if the entire place had transformed, the atmosphere shifting. Tack! The soft click of a heel echoed as she stepped out of the portal. Dressed in a sleek black formal uniform with a white jacket draped over her shoulders, her lustrous black hair swayed gently with each step. Time seemed to freeze all of a sudden. All eyes turned to her as she strode forward, hands in her pockets, her expression haughty and detached. She appeared to be the center of all attention as several figures walked out behind her, their heads lowered in respect. It was also then that several people snapped out of their daze. Oh my god! How can anyone look like that? Is she even human? Indeed, staring at her from where I stood, she looked like a completely different person. Like an empress overlooking her subjects. I should leave. Seeing how much of a commotion she was causing, I decided to leave. However, just as I did so, I felt a pair of eyes fall on the back of my head. I ignored them and just looked at Leon. He was looking at me with a frown. I raised my brow. What? Leon's eyes narrowed even further. Just as I was about to get annoyed, he finally spoke. Did something happen? No, why would I? You seem to be in a bad mood. What happened? Chapter 577, The Congress of Nezharat 2. Why wouldn't I be in a bad mood? We spent most of the day just sitting on a train. And with your strange behavior on top of that, how could I possibly be in a good mood? Well, what you say makes sense, but... There's no but. Let's go. I cut Leon off before he could launch into one of his weird tangents. With one last glance behind me, I strode toward the nearest inn. Having done a bit of research beforehand, I knew exactly where to go. Stepping away from the main street into a more secluded area, I soon found myself in front of a large wooden building. The building was quite large, with several pots of flowers and plants adorning the windows, their leaves cascading downward. At the front of the building was a large sign that read, Moonlight Inn. This should be the place. From the research that I managed to gather, this place was rather cheap and comfy. Ignoring Leon's gaze, I moved into the inn and walked over to the receptionist. 2 rooms, please. That would be 67 ren for the night. For 2, it would be 134. Can we do less? No, the price is fixed. We are almost fully booked. All right. I tried to negotiate the price at the inn, but with so many people around, I had no luck lowering it. It's a pity, but I guess I have no choice. Pausing, I looked at Leon. He was staring at me with a strange look. One that seemed to be a mix of disgust and disappointment. It was a look unbefitting of a knight. Why are you? You know you're a multimillionaire, right? I blinked my eyes. Yes. I more or less had over 70 million ren saved up. But where was he going with this? You know the money you're using was given to you by the family head in order to take care of the accommodation for the two of us, right? Yes. Indeed, the family head had given me some money for this trip. It was about 20,000 rend. Cheap bastard. He gave me a little, but it's not much. Anyway, what's your point? It couldn't be that he wanted my money, right? Hell no. Leon just stared at me without saying a word. And yet his stare said 1,000 words. It was so intense that I instinctively began justifying my actions. Okay, well, I have to save up a lot. You can also sell if things go bad. Right? Though I agreed, I could tell his words were dripping with sarcasm. But I wasn't joking. If things did go bad, he was gone. Every little rend counts, you know? It may only seem like 67 rend, but if I spend it continuously, it'll just add up. Sure. It's true that I get to keep whatever I don't spend, but that's not the main reason I'm doing this. I'm just teaching you the value of money. Yes. It's my money. I know. Fuck you. Okay. I pursed my lips. Why did it feel like I was the one losing the argument? Tisk. I clicked my tongue and turned away from Leon. Taking the key to my room, I didn't wait for him and made my way up to my room, which was located on the 3rd floor. For a small inn, the room was quite decent. With a dominant wooden theme, its simplicity stood out while the white walls provided a perfect contrast to the wooden floor and furniture. I set my things on the floor and took a seat on the wooden chair. Crossing my legs, I checked my pocket watch. Any minute now. Knowing the importance of the Congress, I understood it was best to arrive early. That way, even if there were delays, I would still be on time. Of course, it would have been even better if I had gone earlier, but I had only just received the news, so there was no way I could have prepared in advance. Still, as of right now, I had about a few hours to myself. And I was also sure I wasn't the only one. Are you waiting for someone? A soft voice whispered in the air as a figure soon appeared before me shortly after. Looking up, Delilah stood in front of me, her clothes the same as they were before. I stood up and put my pocket watch away. Yes, actually. Who? You. Eh? Me? I simply smiled at her. I knew her well enough to know what her patterns were. In that sense, I knew she was going to come find me when she had time. I take it that you're free now? A little. She blinked her eyes, seemingly unable to follow the conversation. How much? 10 minutes. Her tone sounded rather resigned. Well, indeed, 10 minutes was practically nothing. Oh, I see. It's a pity. Why do you ask? Well, I have some free time, so I was thinking of going around to Vizzy. I'll go. Delilah's voice raised. But didn't you? I have free time. Before I could get the next words in, she faded away from the spot. Ha! I stared at the empty spot before me and scratched the side of my neck. Things turned out as I expected. For the past 6 months, she had done nothing but work. As her part-time assistant, I saw firsthand just how busy she was. During those times, I frequently overheard her saying, I want a break. I don't want to do this. I even grew a little worried when I saw her reject chocolate from me. In that sense, I thought it would be good if she took some time off work. It was good that she liked the idea as she reappeared in front of me 10 minutes later wearing different clothes. More casual and lighter ones. She also appeared to be holding on to something. I'm ready. What is that in your hand? Is that a book? Why is it so big? Hold on. I took a closer look at the book and saw the title that said Negerat Guidebook, Places to Visit and Sightsee. But not only that, I could even see that it was somewhat worn out. Wait, don't tell me she had been planning this from the start? I was stunned, but before I could fully snap out of it, I felt a tug on my arm as she pulled me toward the door. Trust me, I know where to go. No, that's not the issue. Then what is? Delilah stopped and looked at me, impatience clearly written on her face. Come on, what are you waiting for? Stop dragging things out. I'm just saying, we don't have that much time. Like 3 hours at best. Considering how big that book is, I don't think we'll be able to, eh? Oh, that's fine. Don't worry and leave it to me. We can spend the 3 hours like they're 3 weeks. That's... Why do I not trust her at all? Hurry. All right. Seeing how impatient she was getting, I decided to stop dragging things out. Leaving Delilah aside, whose lips were twitching in an upward curve that she tried to pull back down repeatedly, I walked over to the next room and knocked. Leon opened the door shortly after. What is I? He froze the moment his eyes landed on Delilah, quickly wiping them as if to make sure he wasn't seeing things. But when he looked at us again, his expression twisted. Seeing his reaction, I contained my laugh and showed up the time. Well, let's go. We don't have much time for ourselves. He's coming. Eh? Of course. The moment I agreed, Delilah's lips finally stopped moving and her expression twisted, yes, twisted. She looked like she was ready to murder someone. I covered my mouth then. On the other hand, Leon took a step back. He hastily looked at me. What's going on? Why is she? I dismissively waved my hand. Come on, let's go. Stop wasting time. Leon pressed his lips tightly before glaring at me and then lowering his head in Delilah's direction as though he was trying to greet her. All he received was a cold and murderous look. This look persisted on our way down as we made our way out of the inn. Though her face remained stoic, I could see right through her facade as her expression shifted through a range of emotions: sadness, anger, disappointment. She looked even more dejected than when she was overworked, as if questioning her life choices and convincing herself the world was against her. How amusing. I wish I could take a photo of her face. My fingers twitched at the thought, but I didn't want to push my luck. By the time we finally stepped out of the inn, Delilah's expression had shifted from that of a murderer to that of a mass slaughterer. It almost felt as if she were leaving a trail of blood in her wake. Her expression was so terrifying that people around us instinctively stepped aside, creating a wide berth. And this was even when Delilah had made it so that people couldn't see her. Well, coming to a stop in front of the inn, I looked at Leon. Have fun. Make sure you get your stuff. Yes. As if eager to escape, Leon gave us a quick nod before swiftly backing away and disappearing into the busy streets. I waved until his figure quickly faded from my sight. At the same time, I felt Delilah's dazed gaze on me. She appeared to have so many questions for me. That was when I explained. Leon doesn't have any formal clothing for the event. He's going to one of the shops to get something for himself. Delilah's brows rose and soon she looked at me in shock. Why did you, HM? Is there an issue? Ah. Delilah quickly shook her head. No, none at all. Okay then. I moved a little closer to her, much to her shock. There's a lot of people, so we might get lost. You don't mind, do you? Shake. 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 Delilah hastily shook her head. She seemed to want to say something but appeared unable to as her mouth pursed into an X shape. Well, not really, but it felt like it did. Should we go then? Yes. Stepping closer to me, she strode forward, her steps fast. I followed her from behind and we soon entered the main streets of the city, completely unnoticed by everyone around us. Chapter 578, The Congress of Nejurat 3. Since it looks like you know where to go, where should we go? My gaze unconsciously drifted to the thick book in Delilah's hands. Ever since we left the inn, she would stop, glance at the book, and then head in a specific direction. This had gone on at least 5 times. Normally, I wouldn't have minded, but seeing people around me stare at Delilah, I couldn't help but feel my lips twitch. Didn't she make it so people wouldn't look at her? Yet even so, her presence alone was enough to draw attention. What kind of power was this? I felt like we were in some sort of zoo. Wherever we passed, gazes would wander our way. Well, Delilah's way. Unlike her, I knew how to hide my face well. Oh shit. Looks like someone is finally getting the courage to come talk to her. Just one look his way and I could tell he was someone with somewhat of a status. He also appeared powerful enough to notice something off with Delilah. I found a nice place. Want to check it out? Eh? But we're almost I grabbed Delilah by the shoulders and brought her into the nearest shop. I glanced around. The shop was spacious yet filled with a pleasant, aromatic scent that was soothing to the senses. Ahead were several rows of different clothing, all unique and different than the one I was used to. That's when I realized it was a clothing store. He's here. Looking back, I grabbed a few outfits off the rack and hurriedly pulled Delilah toward the changing rooms before closing the curtain behind me. She had been strangely obedient ever since I pulled her into the store. Well, you should try these. I think they might not be. I stopped halfway through my sentence as I heard the sound of her breath. It was somewhat quick. That's when I realized the kind of situation we had gotten ourselves into. I swallowed quietly and looked towards the closed curtain. I was in a haste, so I didn't think much when I entered. My words were met with silence. Glancing down, I noticed Delilah's gaze fixed on my nose. The space was tight, and with even the slightest movement, we'd be inches away from touching. I tried moving my head back to draw some distance between us, but as though my head was a magnet, Delilah's head followed. I licked my lips and tried to start a conversation. How far did you say the sightseeing place was? It shouldn't be far, right? I already am. Ha! What did she just say? Delilah pulled the handbook behind her and added. There's another one, but it's far. No, I'm pretty sure you said it was close just a few minutes ago. You heard wrong. So you say. No, it is. Sure. It will take a long time, so we can stay here. There it was. Her real motive. However, what could I say to her? Seeing how she was so insistent on it, I decided to stay quiet. But with that being said, Delilah's gaze continued to remain fixed on my face, and I felt a lump form in my throat. Just how long was she going to stare for? It was rather uncomfortable. The notifications flashing in front of me were starting to get increasingly annoying. Thankfully, this hell didn't persist for very long. By the time I was sure that the weirdo was gone, I pulled out of the changing room and reminded Delilah to try on the clothes before leaving. She never did try the clothes though, saying something like, they don't look quite nice. You should have picked something better. But if you also wear the same one, then. Well, sure, I did pick them randomly, but it was for the sake of the situation. In the end, coming out of the shop, we decided to go to a more secluded street in order to avoid any attention. We eventually stopped by the place that Delilah wanted to see, and as expected, it was only a 5-minute walk. I didn't even bother bringing it up to her, knowing she would just randomly switch the topic or feign ignorance. Overall, the place was quite nice. It had a nice view and I managed to relax a little. Unfortunately, it was soon nighttime. Before I knew it, the 3 hours were up, and thus I had no choice but to bid farewell to Delilah, who glared at her pocket watch, mumbling things like, "Scam? Did I get scammed? How could it be?" Seeing how distressed she was, I looked at my pocket watch and laughed. That would make the two of us. I think I also got scammed. Ivina's household. "Father, may I come in?" "You may." As Linus entered the family head's office, he immediately saw the family head sitting behind the desk wearing his usual stern expression. Although he was aware of Linus's presence, Aldrich kept his attention on the documents before him. "Scribble." As a result, Linus stood in front of him with an awkward expression. Each second Linus stood there felt like an eternity, and just when he couldn't hold it any longer, Aldrich finally broke the silence. "I heard that you managed to rank 3rd overall this year." "Ah, yes?" Linus's head shot up the moment he heard his father's words. Ever since the incident with Julian in the mirror dimension, it was as if something had shattered within him. This led to a significant leap in both his abilities and the way others perceived him. As a result, he managed to rank up all the way to the 3rd rank. He was still not the Black Star, but at the rate that he was growing, it wouldn't be possible for him to reach it by the 2nd year. That is not bad." "Yes." Hearing Aldrich's words, Linus's ears perked up. He felt a strange sense of excitement. This, while it wasn't exactly a compliment, it was still a lot better than anything his father had ever said. He was clearly satisfied, and Linus felt moved. But of course, the excitement didn't last for long. "I've received word that your brother, Julian, has recently regained the 1st rank." Aldrich paused and put the pen down before raising his head. "What do you take of that?" "I..." A complicated look flashed Linus's features. He still hated and despised his brother, yet, in a strange way, he had also played a part in helping him grow to this point. There were moments when his brother seemed like a completely different person from the one he had seen in the nightmares and the one he knew. But at the same time, he couldn't forget the moment when his brother had revealed his true self to him. Was he acting, or was there more to it? Regardless of that, if there was one thing that he couldn't deny, it was the fact that his brother was a monster. His rate of growth was unbelievable, and his achievements were second to none. It wouldn't be a stretch to say he was currently the most known cadet. But at the same time, he was also the scariest. Haven's Demon King was what they called him, but the rumor was quickly shut down when Julian found out about it, and he started giving a beating to anyone he heard saying that name. Considering he had never reacted that way to his previous nickname, the twin star of the Ivinus household, it was likely that he loved his previous nickname. With a sigh, Linus turned to his father again. "Within the academy, there's no one that has more prestige than Julian. I've seen his strength firsthand, and I don't see any foul play. In that sense, I have nothing to say about his achievements. He earned them." "I see." Aldrich nodded, but for a brief moment, Linus felt like he caught a fleeting, barely noticeable curve of his lips. However, it lasted only a moment, vanishing as quickly as it appeared, leaving Linus questioning whether what he had seen was real or just his imagination. Unfortunately, he never found out, as he was quickly dismissed from the room, leaving Aldrich alone to lean back in his chair. He stood in silence for a brief moment before a figure appeared beside him. "Family head. MHM." Aldrich merely acknowledged with a nod as the figure started speaking. "The trade deal between the Kasha is proceeding smoothly. The Verlice family has agreed to act as an intermediary between us, and over the past several months we've made significant profits. Should we reinvest the profits into the territory? Not yet. But if we don't, our neighboring households will become restless. As it stands, they'll begin to attack us, claiming that we're not properly managing our land. As they should." Taken aback, the figure met Aldrich's gaze, his eyes dark and endless. Like pools of black that seemed to lead straight into the abyss. Those eyes. They didn't seem like the eyes of a mere family head. "What sort of it?" Cutting his thoughts short was the family head's cold voice. "You need to do what you're told. Nothing more, nothing less." A chance occurred then. It was as if his eyes had come alive, they twisted unnervingly as though they were attempting to swallow him whole. Thankfully, the sensation only lasted for a brief moment before Aldrich turned away and dismissed him. "Ha! HAA. You may go." The figure didn't wait a single second before fading from the spot. It was only after he had left that Aldrich focused his attention back to his work. Scribble, scribble. He continued to work on the files for the next few hours until he suddenly recalled something. "Oh, right." He checked the time. Julian and Leon should have already arrived at the Congress. The Congress was a highly significant event that most would never think of skipping. Aldrich, however, had no intention of attending himself, instead sending Leon and Julian in his place. There were various reasons, but it mostly had to do with the fact that he was too busy handling the situation within his territory. It needed his full attention. With that in mind, Aldrich's thoughts drifted to the letter on his desk. It bore a golden insignia, the symbol of the Verdant Empire. I guess they're finally going to make their move. Their goal was clear, Leon. The Emperor and the Empress were most likely going to reveal Leon's origin at the Congress. It would surely be a sight to see. Still, the fact that they had only recently discovered Leon's origins and whereabouts seemed somewhat amusing. This was especially considering their power and connections. As they say, it's what's hidden in plain sight that's far more elusive than what's hidden behind a veil. Tap, tap, tap. Aldrich tapped onto the wooden table, mumbling. "Leon. Leon. Leon." Chapter 579, The Congress of Nejurat 4. Ah, Amel. It looks like things have been going well for you at the academy. Welcoming Amel inside a private room was none other than the Empress as she extended both hands in an attempt to hug him. Amel simply sidestepped her, his gaze shifting to the Emperor who sat on a single-seat red sofa engrossed in his book. Finally taking note of him, the Emperor placed the book down and turned to face Amel. Looks like you made it in time. Yes, I was stuck with a few things. It was more that he wanted to go with Leon, but Julian left without warning, leaving him no choice but to go by himself. Well, technically his fiancée Agatha did go with him, so he wasn't. Nonetheless, it would have been best if he had gone with Leon. Especially now that they were ready to reveal to him his lineage and real identity. This decision came after Amel had observed Leon enough to know that he would be able to take the news without resentment. Not only that, but after a thorough examination they were now completely certain that Leon was indeed related to them by blood. There was no better opportunity to reveal his true lineage than at the Congress where the world's superpowers were gathered. It would not only legitimize the announcement but also ensure that all the powerful figures recognized his face and understood exactly who he was. But there was only one problem. Father, there's something I'm somewhat hesitant about. Speak. Amel licked his lips. Don't you think it would be best to tell Leon in advance before suddenly dumping it all on him? I feel like it might actually make him resent us if we do it this way. Amel, you understand best why we have to do it like this, right? But this is to ensure his safety. You must understand that if we were able to confirm Leon is part of our family, then the other royal family members and their factions have likely noticed something as well. Yes. Amel nodded his head faintly. He had indeed noticed subtle movements from the other noble houses and the branch families. Leon's presence brought instability to the royal family, and while it was decided that Amel would be the most likely one to inherit the throne, the other members didn't see it the same way. There were many factions in the Verdant Empire, with several eyeing the throne. If Leon joined and supported Amel, then the fine balance that was created would shatter. This was why the Emperor and Empress were so hesitant to meet Leon and inform him in advance. They couldn't risk the news leaking under any circumstances. In order to ensure that it didn't, they planned on announcing everything when the Congress started. There were certainly better ways to handle this, and Amel felt the same, but to minimize the risks, the Emperor and Empress chose this approach. I'm not sure how he'll react to the news, but if we explain it to him later, I hope he'll understand. Do you think he would be upset? I don't know. Amel wasn't too sure. He didn't think Leon would show too much of a reaction. Unless it involved Julian, Leon didn't seem like someone who would get easily flustered. Of course, these were merely his thoughts after having observed him for almost a year. But the concerns were still there. There's no use overthinking this. The Congress is about to begin, and since we've already made our decision, we should see it through. Standing up from his seat, the Emperor set his book aside and massaged his face. Almost instantly, his demeanor shifted, transforming into one of regal authority. At that moment, he was no longer a concerned father, but the Emperor of one of the 4 great empires. Ah! It was just as he was about to leave that he suddenly recalled something. Turning around, he eyed Amel. Should we also reveal his real name to the public? Real name? Amel fell into thought. Indeed, Leon. His real name wasn't Leon. At the very least, it wasn't the name he had been given at birth. His real name was Vareth. This place sure looks grand. Up close, the palace hosting the Congress was even more imposing and breathtaking than it had appeared from a distance. Towering pillars soared several dozen meters high, while a massive red carpet stretched across the marble floor. Elegantly dressed attendees in various formal attire moved through the grand entrance, adding to the palace's atmosphere. Watching the countless people pass by, I felt out of place, yet at the same time it also felt as if I stood out more than ever. No, we're probably standing out. Leon and I weren't exactly the ugliest of people. And not only that, but we were also somewhat famous. I think I've seen them before. My ears perked up as I heard the whispers of the people around us. I gave Leon a side eye. Looks like they recognized the two of us. We did make it to the finals of the summit. That's true. I lifted my head as I stepped onto the palace grounds. Considering my newfound celebrity status, I realized I needed to carry myself with the right demeanor. Not only was I an award-winning actor, but I was also the most talented cadet within the 4 empires. It wasn't surprising that they knew who I was. Julie, the twin stars of the Ivinus household. Yes, it's the twin stars. The twin stars. Kill me and then Leon. Please. Oh, you guys finally showed up. Amid my despair, a familiar voice rang out as Aoife appeared in the distance. Dressed in an exquisitely crafted red gown that complemented her fiery hair, she effortlessly drew the attention of many as she made her way toward us. Behind her were 2 guards in silver armor. Hey! What's wrong with your faces? It looks like you both ate sh. Aoife hastily covered her mouth before she could finish her sentence and looked behind towards the 2 guards who kept their attention fixed elsewhere. With a visible twitch of her lips, Aoife took a deep breath and recomposed herself. As I was saying, you guys don't look good. It's because we've just been harassed. Eh? Harassed? Who would even harass you? You wouldn't understand. I sighed in silence before switching the topic. Where are Kira and Evelyn? You usually are always with them. Oh, about that. Aoife gestured toward the distance where 2 figures stood by the buffet area. The two immediately stood out, and not because of their appearance but because of their antics. With a neatly held handkerchief, Evelyn carefully picked up several items, sampling the snacks with delight before pulling out a small notepad and jotting something down. Beside her, Kira stood in stark contrast, eagerly shoveling food into her mouth without restraint. It was I don't know them. Aoife perfectly summarized the situation. In that sense, I now understood why she was by herself. Well, it's a good thing you two arrived early. With the attention you're already drawing, I can't imagine how chaotic it would be if you had shown up later when the place is completely packed. That would be rather troublesome. I could already see people eyeing us like hawks, ready to pounce on the two of us at any second. If not for Aoife being present, they would have already done so. On that note, this is also a great opportunity for the two of you. How so? To build connections for your family. There are so many high-ranking nobles here, whether from this empire or others. Plus, several major merchant houses and guild leaders are also in attendance. Cooperating with any such figure would massively benefit your houses and you. Well, true, but helping the family wouldn't really benefit me that much. It would at most give me more status. However, the Ivinus family was clearly something that the current family head was in full control of. By the time I gained control of the place, several decades would have passed. Oh, I've been meaning to ask something. Disrupting me out of my thoughts, Aoife suddenly asked. What church is your house currently affiliated with? Why would this matter? The delegates from all 7 churches will also be present. Each is sending an envoy, and depending on which church your house is affiliated with, you might even receive their blessing. I turned to look at Leon. I had no clue about the church our current household was affiliated with. No, it was more like I had forgotten. Mortem. Leon answered in a flat tone shortly after. The Ivinus household is affiliated with the Church of Mortem. I opened my mouth but soon closed it. I wasn't even surprised by this. Thinking about the 7 church gathering that had happened a while back and how Leon had chosen Mortem, it made sense. In fact, I was probably the weird one for not choosing Mortem. Not that I had much of a choice in the matter. Considering the circumstances I had found myself in back then, it had been for the best that I had chosen Cithras instead of Mortem. The Church of Mortem? Yes, that makes sense. I think the Verlies household is also affiliated with them. If that's the case then. Aoife's speech suddenly began to slur, her words faltering as if she had experienced a glitch. She started repeating the same phrases over and over, and when I tried to speak, I came to a sudden realization. I can't speak at all. Before panic could set in, my vision blurred and a wave of dizziness washed over me. I felt my body grow heavy, slipping beyond my control. This feeling. It was somewhat familiar. And that was when I realized. I'm experiencing a vision. TZZ. A static noise filled my ears all of a sudden. Confused, I strained to look ahead as the world around me began to shift, or at least it tried to. TZZ. The static sound echoed once more as my vision glitched. Or rather, it became shrouded by a strange, hazy veil, making it difficult to see through. What in the? Confused, I tried to rip the veil, but as hard as I tried, it wouldn't budge at all. At least, not until the static sound echoed again. TZZ. In that moment, I caught a glimpse of what was behind the veil. A pair of yellow eyes. They stared straight at me. But soon, the veil covered the vision once more. What's going on? TZZ. As the static sound reverberated once more, my gaze dropped to what seemed to be a marble floor. There, spreading across its smooth surface, was a pool of blood. TZZ. The image was cut short, only for it to return again as a boot appeared on top of the puddle. It was made of black leather with intricate golden embroidery. TZZ. But that was all I saw before the veil appeared once more. And then, so you're also here? A voice reached my ears. It echoed from all surroundings. What sort of? Wham. Suddenly light flooded my vision as the world around me seemed to stretch and distort in all directions. By the time I snapped out of it, a loud voice echoed throughout. Please welcome the envoys of the Church of Oracleus. Chapter 580, Saint 1. Draped in white garments, with a golden eye embroidered at the center, the envoys of the Church of Oracleus stepped into the palace. Their presence instantly drew the attention of all those present, all eyes falling on them. Something about their pristine attire and composed demeanor effortlessly drew the attention of everyone around. Looking at them, they felt almost holy, as if they belonged to another world. This was how I felt when staring at them, but at the same time, something about them felt uncomfortable. Julian. Was it because of the vision I had just experienced? Because of the strange static feeling during the vision? Julian. Something about their current presence felt extremely unsettling. As though their presence was the reason for why my vision had turned out the way it did. Wait, could it be? And then my eyes fell on a certain individual. Standing behind the cardinal, dressed in stark black attire and followed by several others, he was impossible to miss. His long black hair cascaded down his back, framing striking green eyes and features that could only be described as handsome, making him stand out even more. And then, his gaze fell on me. And soon a smile crept on his face. It was as though he had expected to see me from the start. His lips parted, forming words in a way that only I could understand. Found you, Julian. A powerful tug on my shoulder pulled me around, and I found myself staring into a pair of gray eyes. Leon's brows were furrowed tightly, his gaze locked onto mine. Is everything okay? Okay? Why wouldn't they be? I responded as calmly as I could have, but perhaps due to my shaken state, my words came out more hurried than intended. Leon's brows furrowed once again. In the end, he shook his head and pulled his hand away. Your face is pale and you're sweating quite a bit. Are you sure that you're okay? Without answering him, I touched the side of my face and realized he was right. I was indeed sweating profusely. Given his words, I didn't even need a mirror to know that my face must have been pale. But still, it wasn't as though I could just tell him what was going on. Given the circumstances, I could only respond with a simple, I'm okay. So you say. Leon didn't believe me at all. As I looked at him, he seemed to sense something, his gaze shifting toward the Oracleus church. By now, they had moved far ahead, venturing deeper into the palace to greet the other guests. Is it them? Not quite. What do you mean not quite? It's something else. As I said those words, I stared at the notification that had flashed before my very eyes. Main quest activated, Royal Dilemma. Character progression plus 317%. Game progression plus 14%. Failure. Aoife K, Megrail 38%. Kira Milne 4%. Evelyn J, Verlice 15%. Haha. Staring at the notification, I found myself at a loss for how to react. In some ways, I had always known it was only a matter of time before the quests returned. But still, I had desperately hoped it would still take a while more before they returned. Because I understood that something troublesome was about to occur. The quests. They never really brought anything that made my life easy. In fact, I can even argue that with the presence of the Oracleus church members, the quests have become even harder. Instead of easing the life of the one they worship, they're doing everything possible to make it more difficult. What a bunch of fucking heretics. I took a deep breath and shook my head. There was no use musing over such matters. My thoughts quickly drifted towards the vision and the quest in front of me. By now, I already had enough clues to get a gist of what was happening. The quest is called Royal Dilemma. Aoife seems to be the one most affected by this. Looking back at the vision, the pair of yellow eyes, the pool of blood, and the black boot adorned with golden embroidery, it most likely involves the royal family. It wasn't too hard to put the pieces together. Of course, I also understood that I couldn't jump the gun quickly. There were several occasions where I jumped to conclusions too early, making me miss very important details of the visions. In that sense, I had to tread carefully. But still, the presence of the Church of Oracleus is making me feel unsettled. Especially recalling the strange individual in black with green eyes and black hair. I didn't need to think hard to understand why he had mouthed those words to me and who he was. The moment I saw him, I knew he was the one who had disrupted me multiple times back at Kira's place. The one who had called me the fake fragment and had rambled on with endless nonsense. From the moment he mouthed those words to me, I knew he had been aware of my identity for some time and had only now chosen to reveal himself. He had most likely been preparing for this very moment. But that saves me a lot of trouble. I had been meaning to find him for quite some time. Not only had he been making my life more difficult by interfering with my visions, but the blood that flowed through his veins. I needed it back. If there was one thing I was sure about, it was that the moment I consumed his blood, I'd be able to fill the gaps that had been missing in my mind. From the strange sense of emptiness that I often felt whenever I thought about the past, to the growth that I'd experienced. Perhaps then, I'd truly become Heraclius. And that was something I needed to become. In order to be able to even put up a fight against Cithras, I had no choice but to become Heraclius. But before anything else, I needed to find a way to get my hands on his blood. And this was the furthest thing from easy. Surrounded by members of the Church of Oracleus, eliminating him and claiming the blood would be anything but easy. Thankfully, it wasn't as though I was completely helpless. But whether I could do it or not was something I didn't know. For now, I only planned on observing before taking action. Julian, let's leave. The Congress is going to begin soon. It was Leon's voice that snapped me out of my thoughts. Raising my head and looking at him, I quietly nodded before turning around and heading deeper into the building. Deep within the building, inside of a large private room, several figures stood. It's a pleasure to be graced by your presence, Cardinal. Haha, the pleasure is mine. A graceful figure approached the Cardinal. With long blonde hair and striking yellow eyes, Atlas greeted him with a smile. His smile was smooth, warm almost. It looks like you're the first to arrive from the 7 churches. Atlas's gaze eventually shifted to the 6 figures standing behind the Cardinal, each clad in black robes. Unlike the Cardinal, they appeared much younger, yet their presence radiated a certain pressure. Enough to rival the top cadets within Haven. These are... how silly of me. The Cardinal stepped to the side and introduced the younglings. These are my apprentices, each carefully nurtured to succeed me when my time finally comes. This right here is... Cardinal Ambrose introduced them one by one before eventually / stopping at Jackal, who moved by himself, extending his hand in Atlas's direction. It's nice to meet you. I've heard a lot about you. Jackal's antics prompted Atlas to raise a brow, studying the young man before him with keen interest. Indeed, staring at him, he felt he was different from the other disciples he met. Not only did he appear calmer than the others, but he was also noticeably more powerful. His very presence set him apart, drawing Atlas's attention. In a way, he seemed to remind Atlas of Julian. But at the same time, the two felt strikingly different. Atlas couldn't quite put it into words, but Jackal gave him an uncomfortable feeling. It wasn't one that would make him feel alarmed, but something about him felt off. It didn't take long for him to figure it out, however. Lowering his gaze to Jackal's outstretched hand, a faint smile tugged at Atlas's lips. After a brief pause, he extended his own hand and shook it. The pleasure is mine. You seem like quite a promising prospect. You remind me a lot of another cadet within the academy. Oh. Jackal raised his brow. Could that cadet be Julian? You know him. Ah, yes. Jackal smiled. I've heard quite a lot about him. I'm a big fan, especially of his accomplishments at the summit. He was indeed quite impressive. Atlas withdrew his hand and redirected his attention back to the cardinal. If you would excuse me, I have matters to tend to. I've received news that the delegates from the other churches have arrived. I hope you all have a pleasant stay. With a graceful bow, Atlas excused himself and quietly left the premises of the room. At the same time, Jackal remained silent, his hands still outstretched. Jackal? It was only when the cardinal's voice echoed that Jackal snapped out of whatever trance he was in and turned around. Are you okay? Did something happen? No, I'm fine. Jackal answered calmly. I was just in thought. A little nervous, perhaps. I see. Then that's fine. Walking up to Jackal, Cardinal Ambrose placed his hand over his shoulder and patted it. Don't worry too much about it. The other churches have already prepared to announce their saint candidates. There's no reason for you to feel nervous. It's just a formality. Nothing will really change. I understand. Jackal answered with a smile, slowly pulling his hand behind his back. There was a specific reason he did so. It was to hide the trembling. Indeed, he had been a little too arrogant. He had originally thought he wouldn't have been noticed, but he was quickly proven wrong. Atlas saw right through him. Nonetheless, he still found something interesting. Dawn. Jackal mumbled. I don't know what it means, but it feels like some pretty important information. Chapter 581, Saint 2. Thank you everyone for coming. Please have a seat while we wait for everyone to arrive. The Congress will begin soon. A grand hall appeared deeper within the building. Rows upon rows of chairs lined the space, and I picked a random seat before settling in. Leon joined me shortly after. We sat further back from where the more important people were, making it a little harder to hear and see. But that wasn't really a problem. It'd be embarrassing if we couldn't hear what was happening as superhumans. It was just a little troublesome. With that being said, if we wanted to, we probably could have sat at the front. Aoife would have gladly. Same for Delilah, who gave me a glance, subtly patting the seat next to her. I merely ignored her and took a seat in our designated spot. Considering our status, we'd be too out of place if we sat at the front. Not only that, Delilah's father was present, so... Oh right, there's something I'm curious about. Recalling something, I turned to face Leon. For how long has our family been followers of Mortem? As those words left my mouth, my gaze instinctively drifted toward the delegates of the Church of Mortem. Like the other churches, they too were dressed in white garments. They sat at the very front alongside the other churches, their robes adorned with a green insignia depicting a snake coiled around a bleeding hand. For as long as I remember, Leon responded, his tone growing somewhat faint. I narrowed my eyes. For some time now, whenever Mortem was mentioned, Leon always seemed uneasy. Was he hiding something? The reason why I'm a follower of Mortem is also because of the house. Considering that they took me in, I followed what they told me to follow. Just like I'm your knight because of it. Oh, then what about Julian? Julian? Leon licked his lips, leaning his head back. I'm not really sure. He always threw a tantrum whenever it was time for our religious duties. Most of the time, it was just me and Evelyn who attended the classes. Oh, yeah, this sounded just about right. This indeed sounded like something Julian would do. Now that I think about it, I know nothing about Julian. His past, how he turned out to be that way, and his relationship with Aldrich and the others. I had thought about it before, but Julian's past seemed filled with a lot of unknowns. My focus had been so consumed by the effort to seal him away that I hesitated to use the second leaf and uncover more about his past. In a way, I had been afraid of what would happen if I got too close. I didn't want to lose control of this body again. But what about now that he's sealed? Perhaps now I could do so. I no longer had to worry about him seizing control of the body again. In that sense, using the second leaf on him shouldn't be an issue. I'd also learn more about the past and what turned Julian that way. Right, Leon? You also mentioned that Julian wasn't always like this. When did you first notice a change in him? When? Leon raised his head slightly, his eyes growing hazy. Rather than instantaneous, it happened gradually. Gradually. His obsession didn't surface right away. It started gradually. At first, we didn't think much of it. But as time passed, he grew more aggressive and unhinged. I think if the change had been instant, then people would have started questioning if he had been possessed sooner. Yeah, that makes sense. But now that I think about it, Leon's eyes narrowed as he massaged the bottom part of his jaw. It was around the time he began practicing curse magic with the family head that he started to change. I think that was when I first started noticing the changes in him. No, more than that. That was when he started to develop an addiction to the sword. Eh? I stopped for a moment before hastily looking at Leon. Did you, Jay? Yeah, I know. Leon pursed his lips. But I don't think the family head had anything to do with it. Well, I'm not sure. He coached both Julian and me, teaching us the sword. But unlike me, Julian wasn't talented at all. I feel like that might be the real reason he changed. Oh, I see. Putting it that way, it made sense. However, there was something else that I recalled. I remember you said learned a unique sword technique. The incomplete one that you asked me to help you with. What about it? Where did you learn that? That one? I didn't learn it from anyone. I found it. I see. Thinking back to his sword technique, I had indeed helped him refine it some time ago. Yet I hadn't seen him use it since then. That was odd, especially considering how powerful it was supposed to be. But then again, I hadn't seen Leon fight at his fullest in a long time. Nonetheless, I was quite curious about that sword technique. Given how I had been able to develop the footwork for it, what would happen if I practiced it? I hadn't given it much thought before, too preoccupied with other matters. But if I were to ask Leon to teach me the sword, would I actually be able to learn it? Leon had previously said that Julian wasn't very talented with swords. But what about me? I wasn't exactly Julian. Would I? It appears as though everyone is present. A soft yet authoritative voice jolted me out of my thoughts. Almost instantly, my head snapped toward the front, where an old man with a long white beard and glasses stood. Immediately, whatever noise had filled the hall vanished into silence. All eyes soon focused on the elderly figure. Noticing how quiet everyone became, I suddenly grew curious. Who exactly was this old man? Haha. It seems my reputation still carries enough weight to capture everyone's attention. That being said, I can see some of you look a bit confused about who I am. In that case, allow me to give a brief introduction. The old man removed his glasses, displaying his clear yellow eyes. I'm the current emperor of the Nuz and Sifa Empire, Joseph L. Megrail. My mouth dropped upon hearing his introduction. At the same time, I felt a little embarrassed. The fact that I couldn't even recognize the current emperor of the empire was a pretty big deal. Not only that, but his eyes were the biggest giveaway. It was just that, I didn't expect the current emperor, Aoife's father, to be this old. While people in this world lived longer than in my old one, judging by his appearance, I was certain he was well over 100 years old. No, it makes sense. Thinking about it, Atlas was also extremely old. It was just that he managed to make himself look younger, unlike the current emperor. As my thoughts wandered to the current emperor, a sudden realization struck me. Hastily, I lowered my head, my gaze locking onto the shoes he was wearing. Although it wasn't exactly easy considering that they were hidden behind his black robe, I still managed to catch a glimpse of them. Ah! It felt as if the air had been knocked from my lungs, and for a moment, I nearly rose to my feet. But I soon settled down and leaned back on my chair. I really hope that I'm wrong. If it was as I imagined, then the Emperor was going to be murdered. I lowered my head and covered it with both of my hands. I really hoped that I was wrong. Asterisk. The Congress was a 5-day event, with each day dedicated to discussing different problems and pressing issues. The first 4 days were designated for the emperors of each nation, with each ruler taking a day to speak, while the final day was reserved for the members of the 7 churches. Today's was the Nuz and Sifa's turn. I had initially expected the emperor's speech to be a long-winded monologue filled with meaningless formalities. But to my surprise, it was clear and easy to understand. To summarize his key points, the mirror dimension was becoming increasingly unstable. He emphasized the need for cooperation to prevent its expansion and maintain balance, among other concerns. And that was basically it. He spoke for no more than 30 minutes before finally ending it. Clap, clap, clap. As the hall thundered with applause and the emperor waved his hand, I also joined in. This continued for the next several minutes until it all came to an end and the silence returned. Still standing in the middle, the emperor smiled and spoke. Now that I've finished, I'll be taking questions for the next 30 minutes. If any of you have something to ask, please feel free to do so. Immediately, over half of the people present raised their hands. I stared at the scene speechlessly before turning my head to look at Leon. But it was right as I turned my head that I noticed something strange with Leon. Are you okay? His entire face had gone pale, and sweat trickled down the side of his face. Staring at him, I grew alarmed. My alarm deepened when I saw him raise his arm. That was when I noticed his hair, every strand standing on end. Before I could get any words out, Leon's lips parted. Something is about to happen. Something really bad. He clenched his shirt. My entire body is screaming in alarm. We need to get out of this place. We need to warn everyone that something is about to happen. I don't know how much time we have. Leon tried to stand up, but just as he did, I placed my hand over his sleeve and pulled him back down. What? Ignoring Leon, I took out my pocket watch. Tick, tick. It was 8:34 p.m. Leaning back on my chair, I took a deep breath and opened my status window. That was when I activated my skill, Eyes of the Seer. At the same time, my eyes drifted towards a certain individual sitting in the front. I wonder if you'll interfere once again. I hoped he did. That way I'd be able to take it all from him. Chapter 582. Saint 3. Tick, tick. 8:36 p.m. 2 minutes had elapsed since Leon's words. So far, everything was still flowing naturally. There was nothing strange with the situation. Julien, we should leave now. If something. Don't worry. I've got it. But, relax. The only unusual thing was Leon, who wasn't acting like himself. He seemed a bit panicked, though there was no real reason for concern. In this current situation, I can turn back time regardless of what happens. Well, that is as long as something happens within an hour. That was the time limit of the skill. Whether it was the two of us who died, someone else, or even if the entire place crumbled, I would be able to handle it. But that also begged the question. Considering just how many powerful people are present, how can something happen? Surely Delilah or the several people who gave off the aura of a monarch would be able to react in time, right? That was unless something completely out of everyone's expectations occurred. But what? What could that be? I guess I'll just wait and see. Tick, tick. 8:41 p.m. 5 more minutes had passed. So far, nothing had yet to occur. This made me frown, but I wasn't too worried. Taking a look at Leon, who sat next to me, and seeing his face growing paler, I felt more reassured. His instincts were usually right. I just have to wait a little more. I still had give or take 50 minutes. That was plenty of time. Tick, tick. 9:02 p.m. Or so I thought. But as 20 more minutes passed, nothing had still occurred. This made me frown. I still wasn't panicking since there was still time, but things were starting to go in a direction that made me feel uncomfortable. Do you have any idea why the mirror dimension is growing so unstable lately? Is there some sort of answer to the strange phenomenon? Overhearing a certain question coming from the audience, I raised my head to see one of the reporters holding onto a small notepad. Since he was seated, I couldn't gauge his height, but he appeared quite lanky. His brown hair was styled in a bowl cut, and a pair of square-shaped glasses rested on his long nose. Jotting something down on his notepad, he continued. This phenomenon has not only occurred in the Naz-Ansifa Empire but in all other empires. The situation within the Kasha is also extremely dire. Those Barb. The reporter paused for a brief moment before continuing. However, his disdain for those of the Kasha was quite clear. Those people do not have the necessary order to fend off the monsters coming from the mirror dimension, leaving the other empires bearing the brunt of their incompetence. How does the Naz-Ansifa Empire plan on handling the situation? Will you be helping the other empires? His question brought a wave of whispers and murmurs throughout the hall. Even I was surprised by his questions. Does this guy not care about his life? To ask such questions in front of the emperor of the strongest empire. He really had a lot of balls. Taking a look around, I could see several vassals belonging to the Naz-Ansifa Empire showing signs of anger, and some knights even went as far as touching their weapons. But thankfully, the emperor didn't seem to mind the question as he raised his hand to calm everyone down. With a smile, he soon answered. While you're only allowed one question at a time, seeing the looks that some are giving me, I'll just answer all of your questions. He looked quite friendly while speaking. His voice was also pleasing to the ear. So much so that for a moment, I forgot all about the time and just focused on his words. The reason for the sudden change in the mirror dimension is not known yet. We've tried to find more clues regarding the situation, but unfortunately, we weren't able to figure much. Even after so much time has happened? Unfortunately, the emperor turned to look at the delegates from the other empires. For several reasons, the other emperors weren't present. Or it was more like, they were watching the entire thing from another more hidden area. It can't be helped. I've tried coordinating with the other empires, but they too also seem helpless regarding the situation. It's not something that we can figure out considering just how vast the mirror dimension is. I see. Then what about the Kasha? What are your plans? Will you help the other empires? The emperor smiled before shaking his head. No. His words were met with a brief moment of silence before suddenly, the hall erupted into an uproar. What? You're not willing to help? Aren't you supposed to be the strongest of the 4 empires? Why aren't you helping? This is a crisis that involves everyone. Isn't this Congress supposed to be held to improve the relationship between the 4 empires? Are you trying to achieve the opposite? Indeed, nobody appeared to be pleased by the situation. I could feel the animosity in the room and my body started to tense. Tick, tick, 9:05 p.m. Could this be it? Could Leon's bad feelings stem from here? The uproar in the room continued to persist for the next several minutes until the Emperor finally raised his hand, and one by one, everyone started to calm down. Regaining everyone's attention again, the Emperor turned his attention towards the reporter. Please don't misunderstand. It's not like we're not trying to help. It's that we've already helped. What? The hall erupted into a wave of murmurs and whispers. I could even hear some of them coming from those beside me as they said, "They helped? How come I've never heard of that? Is he lying?" I was also confused, but soon, a thought crossed my mind and my brow twitched. This bastard. May I have everyone's attention? Clapping his hand gently, the Emperor brought everyone's attention back to him as he retrieved a small spherical object from out of thin air. Tapping onto it, an image of a clear sky appeared. What do you guys think of this image? It was a simple question, one that made a lot of people's brows furrow. Isn't that just the regular sky? What about the sky? The more confused the people appeared to be, the more the Emperor's smile seemed to relax. Looking at him, I felt my mouth twitch again. This guy. What if I were to tell you all that this sky isn't within any of the Empire's land? What? How does that? This right here is the sky belonging to the Eastern Kasha. Flick. The image shifted, revealing a vast city in the distance. One surrounded by towering walls, with a massive golden building standing prominently. The hall fell into a stunned silence as everyone looked at the image in disbelief. Before chaos could erupt, the Emperor spoke. What you see here is real. Those from the Verdant Empire can confirm this. The Emperor eyed those from the Verdant Empire before continuing. Not only that, but the ones responsible for this was none other than my empire. You say that we should contribute, but the reality of the matter is that we have already contributed. Right now, the burden that the Verdant Empire sustains is a lot less than before. Furthermore, with the improved relations with the Kasha, we've also managed to trade more with them. Staring directly at the reporter, the Emperor's tone grew softer. We've already contributed more than enough. We have achieved more than any other empire has. And it cost us dearly. Fuck yeah, it did. My mental health and a lot of pain. The list could go on, but before any of that, I felt like throwing a chair towards the Emperor. He was very clearly taking credit for all my hard work. He was also shameless enough to make it seem like they sent thousands upon thousands of troops in order to achieve this. It was all me. At least pay me. If you managed to achieve such a feat, then why not do it for the other empires? It could help Ma. At the cost of our empire's forces? Cutting the reporter off, the Emperor's eyes narrowed a little. You seem to be talking a lot about altruism, but you must understand that I'm the Emperor of a large empire. The most powerful, if I may add. What do you think will happen if I use all my forces to help out the others? Can you guarantee that the other empires will leave us alone? That. The reporter started to stutter. Indeed, the Emperor was making a great point. If he did use a lot of resources to help the other empires, it would lead to their forces weakening. If that happened, then would the Nuz and Sifa still be considered the strongest empire? To some extent, helping them out was essentially going to weaken the empire while making life easier for the other empires. The Emperor would be a fool to help. Of course, the real issue was that he didn't have a zenith to rip the sky for him. Even if the Emperor wanted to, there was no way he could do what the old man did. He's as shameless as they come. Unknowingly, my gaze fell on Aoife, who sat at the front with a stoic expression. No, wait. Looking closely, I could see her face was entirely red. So she's at least aware of how shameless her father is. As if sensing my gaze, her head slowly turned and our eyes met. Immediately, her face started to wince as she bit onto her lips. I just sliced my thumb across my neck. Didn't really care if others saw me threaten the princess. Either way, time was going to reset anyway. It was then that it happened. Tick, tick, 9:11 p.m. Before I could even understand what was happening, several people stood up in succession. Swoosh, swoosh. I recognized several. A few were some of the powerful people I presumed to be monarchs or at least close to that level. But most importantly, all such figures were delegates from the other empires. Their actions were sudden and unexpected, catching many off guard. At that moment, I intently focused on every little detail around me, imprinting everything in my mind. I knew that whatever was about to happen next was of extreme importance. And it was then that I noticed it. The eyes of those that stood up. They're hollow. Spirit. Someone quick. Attack. The expressions of many changed, with several springing into action. But by then, it was too late as several spells shot in the direction of the Emperor. They were so fast that even though Delilah managed to react extremely fast, she was only able to stop several. Your Majesty! Your... Bang! A terrifying explosion thundered throughout the palace, shaking the very pillars that were holding the structure in place. Ah! Help! Screams echoed, while the palace rumbled. Rumble! Rumble! By the time the dust settled, everyone's attention fell towards the direction of the emperor. Eh? What? What is going on? He's... An unexpected scene greeted the eyes of all those present. Standing before the emperor was a green-eyed figure, his dark garb swaying gently as several figures in white stood behind him, holding onto a massive shield that guarded both him and the emperor. He stood before everyone, his lips gently pulled as his eyes eventually settled in my direction. Ah! That was when it became clear to me. Indeed, the reason why my vision was static was none other than because of him. He stole my vision and prepared for this very moment. The moment when he would swoop in and save the emperor. Ha! I found myself laughing, quietly sitting back down in my seat as chaos erupted around me. And then, tick, tick, 8:34 p.m. Time reset. Chapter 583, Hide and Seek 1. With the flow of time turning back, the chaos that had once erupted in the hall faded. In its place was the Emperor's soft voice. With the worsening of the mirror dimension, we found that more and more monsters are starting to threaten the supply stations, forcing a lot of our manpower to focus there. Not only that, but the monsters also appear to be stronger. I'm afraid that we're about to reach a critical point of no return. I could still distinctly remember each word that came out of the Emperor's mouth, and as I slowly turned my head, my eyes focused on a certain figure sitting at the front. He seemed focused on the Emperor, his gaze sometimes flicking towards his nearby guards. Just how far can you steal from me? He had stolen my vision and acted accordingly, turning the situation into one where he saved the Emperor's life. In that sense, I could predict what he'd do next. He'd probably try to request something that might involve me. Is this your plan? I leaned back on my chair and covered my mouth. It was quite the plan, and if not for Leon's warning, it could have even succeeded. But there was one thing that he had overlooked. And it wasn't the fact that I could see into the future. I was certain he also couldn't, given that he didn't react strangely. Of course, it could have been an act, but I didn't think so. Most importantly, the one thing that Jackal overlooked was the fact that his actions might not get him in the good graces of the Emperor. At least, if the Emperor was related to the inverted sky. If he was, then I could more or less guess what the intentions behind the incident were. The complete breakdown of the relationship between the four empires. Or perhaps a reason for the Nuz and Sifa Empire to conquer and attack the other empires, taking them all for itself? I felt this was something Sithras would do. Of all the empires, his reach within the Nuz and Sifa Empire was extremely deep-rooted. I would even go as far as to argue that the royal family was a puppet designed to follow his orders. But this was merely a hypothesis from my side. However, taking into consideration how everyone that had attacked seemed to belong to the three other empires, I had reason to believe that my thoughts weren't far off from the truth. It's a pity that Atlas didn't fill me in on anything. I was probably still not strong enough for him to involve me in such matters. How much easier would things be if he did? Julian. Overhearing Leon's words, I shook my head. Don't worry. We still have time before anything happens. What? How do you? Just observe your surroundings and look for anyone that might look suspicious to you. What are you talking about? At least Shoo. I placed my finger over my lips. Give me some time to think. The key to solving this situation was rather simple. It was to find the spirit user that was capable of controlling the powerful people from the other empires. Of course, knowing how they were capable of controlling such powerful people, I understood that even if I did find them, beating them would be an almost impossible task unless I somehow managed to get close enough to them to touch them. But I didn't really need to do that. Delilah was here, and so were a lot of other powerful people. All I needed to do was find the spirit user. But how exactly can I do that? I thought about the obvious, which was to ask for Delilah to help, but considering how her every movement was very likely monitored by everyone in the room, I understood it wouldn't be a good idea. Atlas was also out of the question, considering how he most likely had a part in the matter. In that case, yeah, we're on our own. I sighed. What a surprise. What do you mean we're on our own? As Leon whispered next to me, I gave him a short reply. Just like you think, something is most likely going to go wrong. I thought about telling this to the Chancellor or asking for help, but that would be pointless. Nobody is going to believe us, and asking the Chancellor for help would make the ones involved to be more careful. Could buy time though, so I took that into consideration. If I hadn't figured anything out by the time the deadline hit, I planned to involve her in some way. First things first. How much do you know about spirit magic? As much as you. Wait, why are you suddenly ask? As Leon paused, it finally hit him as his head flicked towards the front. Are you suggesting that someone is going to? Yes, exactly that. I was glad Leon was sharp enough to understand what I was trying to imply. His expression stiffened as he looked at me, his eyes narrowing. How do you even know this? No, never mind. Leon shook his head. Now is not the time for this. I'm glad you understand. Leon's mouth twitched, but he soon let it go. Regarding your question, I know just as much as you about spirit users. If you're suggesting that someone is planning on causing trouble using spirit magic, the two main ways would be through touch or voice. In some ways, it's pretty much the same as emotive magic. However, as far as I know, I don't think they're capable of doing delayed attacks. Delayed attacks? You mean tags? Yes. My eyes fell on the ones involved in the situation. There were a total of 7 of them, and they all sat with their backs straight, expressions normal while listening to the Emperor. If you put it that way, then things can be narrowed down quite a bit. I focused on the 7 figures behind the situation and observed everyone sitting around them. There were quite a few, and seeing as not all of them were sitting together, a thought occurred to me. Could there possibly be more than one spirit user responsible for this? Otherwise, how is it possible to affect them through touch if they couldn't do tags? Unless it was not just one spirit user but multiple or had some sort of way to delay the attack, I didn't think touch could be an effective means. Then, it can only be through voice. That was when it finally hit me and my gaze fell on the reporter who had been having an exchange with the Emperor. Back then, the only ones that had been speaking were none other than him and the Emperor. In that case, it's either one of the two. I couldn't discard the possibility that the Emperor had been the one responsible for getting people to attack him. Having been screwed over many times before, I knew not to discard any possibility. This is really troublesome. Did you figure something out? I did. But what? I pursed my lips before eventually answering. There's a chance the culprit might be the Emperor himself, and the means is most likely through voice. As expected, Leon's face almost collapsed the moment I said those words. If not for the fact that he knew how to keep composed, I was afraid he might have given himself away. Who? I could hear him taking a deep breath as his eyes eventually shut. You understand just how ridiculous your claim is, right? I know. But you still think there's a chance it's him? Yes. Is there anyone else I should be aware of? Yes, the reporter with the bowl cut seated in the 3rd row. That one. Yes. Okay. Leon opened his eyes, his expression calming down considerably. It was enough to leave me somewhat surprised. As if he could read my thoughts, he answered flatly. I expected something this ridiculous to happen the moment we left the academy. That's why I'm not even surprised. Makes sense. As sad as it was, Leon had a point. I was indeed quite unlucky. Be it the academy or outside of the academy, something tended to happen to me. There was no use denying the fact that I was a jinx. Well, it's mostly because of the quests, but it's not like trouble still doesn't follow me even when they don't appear. One more question. Do you know who will get affected by the spirit magic? Yes, and I even know the time. Leon's eyes narrowed further, but I feigned ignorance. Leon eventually shook his head in resignation. He spoke after a little bit of thought. Since you know who will get affected, the time in which they'll get affected, and who might be responsible for it, can't we just have the Chancellor prevent any noise from reaching the victims in question? It's possible. I nodded. This was one of the solutions I had previously thought about. But there were problems with this solution. First, nothing is stopping the spirit user from switching targets. Second, Delilah's actions could easily be mistaken for an attack. You're right. Leon nodded after a brief thought before speaking again. But she's one of the strongest people here. I don't think she is scared of anyone in the room even if they get angry. That's true. Nonetheless, her actions could also be taken as a sign of aggression, giving another reason for the relationship between the 4 empires to break down. This situation is a lot more complicated than I thought. The possibility that there was some variable I hadn't accounted for and that my current conclusions might be wrong loomed over me like a scythe, ready to decapitate me at any moment. The worst part of the situation was that I felt completely chained. With so many powerful people present, I couldn't act like I usually did. Any small movement I made could be noticed at any moment. I was stuck in my seat, bound in a way that kept me from moving. This felt suffocating. Time, 9:05 p.m. At the same time, are all preparations ready? Jackal's gaze fell on the Templar stationed next to him. Following his orders, they had been ready to act at any second. Following the vision he had experienced, he understood just what sort of opportunity was about to fall on his lap. He planned on using this chance to save the Emperor and have him own a debt to him. If that happened, then getting his hands on the fake fragment was going to be even easier than expected. Having spent the past half a year preparing his body, he was now ready to take what originally belonged to him back and fully inherit Oracleus's powers. To become Oracleus himself. I can't waste this chance. There was still some time left before the scenario happened, and as he thought about the situation, his gaze drifted back, towards the fake fragment. It was there that Jackal caught him staring at the front, his face seemingly oblivious to the situation. A thin smile spread across his lips at the sight. As expected, the difference between us is big. The reason Jackal was able to steal Julian's vision was simply because the purity of Oracleus's blood in his body was purer. This was the difference between the two of them. Thinking about this, Jackal turned his head away and shifted his attention back towards the Emperor. Everything was proceeding smoothly. It was soon time for him to act. By then, everything would belong to him and he would take what rightfully belonged to him. As his thoughts wandered toward the future, Julian's head slowly turned in the direction of Jackal's turned head. Soon, a smile formed on his lips as his lips parted. Why didn't I think about it before? Chapter 584. Hide and Seek. 2. Leon felt the hair at the back of his neck rise. As each second ticked by, his breathing became more labored, and his legs and hands began to twitch. A deep sense of anxiety started to dawn in his gut. It felt suffocating, paralyzing, and yet, he said that everything will be all right, but is he really taking me seriously? Leon shifted his attention toward Julian as he sat next to him, his expression calm while he looked ahead and listened to the conversation that the Emperor was having with one of the reporters. Everything on the surface appeared calm. Everyone was focused on the conversation with seemingly no worries. No, in fact, a few people appeared restless. In particular, when seeing the Emperor display several images of a blue sky, Leon noticed that several people grew more interested in the situation, with a wave of murmurs sweeping the hall. Could this be true? Did he say that he was capable of turning the sky like that in the Eastern Kasha? But how is that possible? Leon knew all about what the Emperor was talking about. After all, he had been there to witness it all. And yet, Leon only felt his back sweat more and more with each passing second. The only reason he was able to remain seated was because Julian seemed to be aware of what was going on. He was aware and also calm. But how could he remain so calm? Considering everything that Julian had shared, the situation was serious. Who? Leon took a deep breath and closed his eyes. The restless feeling was starting to become extremely discomforting. As he grew stronger, so did his intuition skill. In fact, he could use the skill at will now. Of course, there were still occasions where his skill didn't work or detect anything suspicious, but that was mainly because his strength was still lacking. The stronger he became, the less likely such variables would appear. He hadn't reached the point where the skill would activate automatically, but in moments of true danger, it would trigger on its own. And right now, Leon felt it scream more than any time in the past. Just how long do I have to wait for? Opening his eyes, Leon turned his attention towards the nearby clock and checked the time. It was 9:10 p.m. Bah! Thump! Bah! Thump! Leon felt the beat of his own heart drum loudly within his mind as his breathing grew even more labored. It's coming soon. Really soon. The reaction was even more intense than before, and when he turned his head, he saw that Julian's back had straightened, and he was looking in a certain direction with unnatural sharpness and attention. Following Julian's line of sight, Leon saw him looking in the direction of those from the Oracleus church. Why was he? And then it happened. Right when the clock struck at 9:11 p.m., a change occurred to the hall. Swoosh! Swoosh! As if automatically programmed to act at that specific moment, Leon saw the Templars from the Church of Oracleus suddenly dash in the direction of the Emperor. Their movements were fast, appearing before the Emperor in a split second. Swoosh! Almost at the same time they moved, Julian stood up from his seat, pointing in the direction of the Emperor. The Emperor is under attack! His voice echoed through the hall, and as it filled the minds of everyone present, all attention shifted to the men standing before the Emperor as they focused their attention on the audience, seemingly waiting for something. But there was only one problem. Whatever they were expecting, it never occurred. As a result, they appeared in front of the Emperor with their weapons drawn. All the Templars could see were thousands of eyes fixed on them from the direction of those in attendance. And then, boom! The hall erupted in chaos. The Emperor is under attack. Quick! Quickly! Somebody stop them! The guards positioned throughout the area sprang into action, their movements swift and precise as they charged and surrounded the Templars who had advanced before the Emperor. A series of spells shot in the direction of the Templars as they had no choice but to raise their shields in order to protect themselves. Bang! The palace trembled as a wave of pressurized wind swept through the hall, forcing a few people back. As the residual mana from the series of attacks faded, the entire scene shifted as the Templars were surrounded from all sides. their expression filled with shock and confusion as they turned to look in the direction of Jackal, who looked equally stunned. Everything had happened so quickly that hardly anyone was able to react in time. But soon, as if understanding what had happened, Jackal's face twisted. However, he was quick to recover as he shouted, "What is the meaning of this?" His voice boomed loudly, his attention directed towards the Templars. It was his loud voice that cut through the chaos that was within the hall, and brought a moment of silence. "How dare you try to act against the Emperor?" There was something about his voice that felt domineering and powerful. It was enough to attract the attention of several as they turned to look in his direction. Who is he? What is he doing? As if realizing the plan had failed, the Templars' eyes suddenly grew hazy. Before any of the guards or bystanders could approach, their faces turned purple, veins bulging from their heads, and soon, thump, thump, they all fell to the floor, dead. What? No! Several screams echoed throughout, but there weren't many. It was mainly the reporters or the weak-minded people who had been invited as extras. A lot of the individuals present were used to such situations, and as such weren't surprised by what had happened. What was most alarming was the fact that they killed themselves so decisively, especially in front of so many powerful figures. Nonetheless, all attention soon fell on those from the Church of Heraclius. In particular, the Cardinal. With him being the highest one in position, it was only natural that he would get all of the attention. However, it was an unexpected figure who spoke up. Of all the delegates, he appeared to be the calmest one. With a sigh, he was the first to approach the Emperor. "I apologize, Your Majesty. I don't understand how something like this could have happened. Although the Templars aren't directly under my jurisdiction, it is also true that they were with me. Considering how they did something like this, I'll take full responsibility for the events. If you wish to detain someone, please take me in." Following the death of the Templars, a little bit of order had been re-established in the hall. As everyone processed Jackal's words, a wave of murmurs and whispers echoed. Why is it him again? Shouldn't the responsibility fall on the Cardinal? Why is he speaking on behalf of the Church? Is the Church of Heraclius going to use him as a sacrificial lamb for this failure? The hall fell silent the moment the Emperor raised his hand. In spite of what had happened, he looked fully composed as he walked up towards Jackal, his gaze scanning the young boy. Eventually, his lips parted, and he asked, "I respect your willingness to put yourself forth and take responsibility, but that responsibility shouldn't fall on you." The Emperor's gaze eventually fell on the Cardinal. It should fall on him. As the Emperor fixed his gaze on the Cardinal stepped forward, only to be halted by Jackal, who remained calm and composed. That would certainly be the case under normal circumstances, but with a clear conscience, I cannot let the Cardinal bear the blame for this. As the next saint of the Church of Heraclius, I believe the responsibility should fall on me instead. The next saint. Saint. Immediately, the hall erupted once again in a series of whispers. Even Leon was surprised. How could he not be? The Church had several important positions, with the Pope holding the highest rank. Below the Pope, the Cardinal position was considered the second most prestigious, at least on the surface. However, there was in fact one position higher than the Cardinals. The saint position was granted to those chosen to inherit the Church's legacy, as well as to serve as the next Pope. In the absence of the Pope, the highest-ranking delegate was not a Cardinal, but rather the saint. As a result, Jackal's words did hold weight. "You're the saint." Even the Emperor looked surprised by the sudden piece of news. Clearly, this wasn't something that anyone knew. "Indeed, I am the current saint." Jackal lowered his head in respect. "It is unfortunate that I introduce myself like this, but given my current position and status, I have no choice but to step up and take responsibility for this mess." A strange silence filled the surroundings following his words as the Emperor eyed the saint. Nobody could tell what the Emperor's thoughts were as his eyes remained empty, but soon enough, his lips parted. "I understood." With a gentle nod, he directed his attention towards the nearby guards. "Detain him." The guards swiftly moved toward the saint as he raised both hands in surrender. The entire time, the saint remained calm as he followed every little instruction from the guards and accepted the results without any complaints. His quick and decisive actions earned the admiration of those in attendance as he was soon brought away. Following his departure, the Emperor turned his attention back towards the audience. "Well, that was unexpected." He smiled. "I would normally continue with the Q&A, but considering what has just happened, it would be best if we stop here for now. I do apologize for what has happened, and wish all of you the best." The Emperor retreated shortly after that as noise returned to the hall. As Leon sat in his seat, he slowly turned his head to look at Julian. Or at least tried to. When he turned his head, he realized something. Julian. He was missing. Ah shit. Leon leaned his back against the chair and cursed. Not again. If you want access to fast updates or the full novel in high-quality audio, contact me now and buy. I offer over 300 complete audiobooks from Pocket FM, Webnovel, Audible, and more. No locked episodes, no subscriptions, just one-time payment via PayPal or Ko-fi. Message me directly on Telegram or WhatsApp, or check out the full list of available novels on Discord. Start listening to your next favorite audiobook today.